People who have seen multiple people quit a job in one day. What happened? Before we get started, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and turn on the bell so you don't miss future videos. Thanks for the support. They sidestep a manager that had a 10-year career in the company, being consistently nice and well-performing to give the son-in-law of the CEO the job. 4 people quit after the news. Next story. Worked for a firm that sold financial products. Company had 6,000 employees and 200 salespeople. I was one of them. We had a great year and sold more product than any prior year. There was a big company-wide meeting on a Friday congratulating us. Great, right? Monday at noon, a mass email went out canceling all our annual sales bonuses. 40 salespeople walked that day. 40 more were out by the end of the week, so just under 50% of the sales force. This was a well-respected company and never had a problem recruiting. As soon as word got out about the canceled bonuses, it killed the firm's reputation. Next story. New CEO announces that everyone must be in office at least 3 days a week. No exceptions. No thought to the fact that most of the staff had been hired as remote or that they'd downsized the office space accordingly. Next day, his inbox is full of resignation letters. Over half the department quit. It turns out that the liberal policy was the only thing keeping people there. Next story. I was an ER nurse. I was on duty during a holiday and knew what to expect. There were several young nurses who were working their first holiday and were not happy about it. As the day became more crazy, the nurses were more vocal about missing out on their holiday plans. Finally, it is early evening. The waiting room is packed, and every exam room was filled. I became very concerned why it was taking so long to get the flow going. It turns out, I was the only nurse left. The others all left to go home to be with their families. None returned to work another shift. One said she was upset so many people decided to get sick on a holiday. Next story. It didn't happen all in one day, but it was within a week or two of one another. I worked for Child Protection Services in a state that has one of the lowest populations in the country, but had one of the highest numbers of children in foster care above even California or New York. Best practice to serve families and children safely and well is around 25 to 30 kids on a caseload. Some of us had almost 80 kids on our caseloads. We were drowning, working crippling overtime, and begging for help, and constantly pointing out how unsafe and negligent those caseloads were and what a disservice we were doing to children and parents, and the reunification process, and even the foster parents caring for the children, and were constantly being told we weren't doing enough. One day, we were all called into a meeting where the head of the Department of Health and Human Services, the very department in charge of CPS, intended to address our concerns. Or so we thought. She stood up and gave us a scathing lecture about how none of us were victims. We chose to be employed there, and we should just be quiet and do our jobs and be thankful for the employment. Within a week or two, anyone in my office that had been employed there with any significant time or experience resigned and took other, far less stressful social work positions in the community. Some that even paid better and didn't require overtime. They were left in shambles, and with only entry-level workers barely out of training, and had to redistribute hundreds of cases. I'd love to be able to say there have been reforms or improvements in my state, but sadly, there hasn't been. Next story. Had a drunk for a vice president. Like every day, drinking by 12 noon drunk. He was highly inappropriate all the time, a mean bully, and tried sleeping with as many women as possible on his teams. The 3 directors that reported directly to him all quit on the same day. I was one of the directors. At least 3 to 4 people on each of our teams also quit after we walked out. In total, 11 people quit that day, and another 6 within a week. It represented about 1/3 of the entire IT staff. The CIO tried to get us all back, but we had been complaining to him for months, and he did nothing because he was also a drunk and was the VP's main drinking buddy. They would leave the office at 3 p.m. every day and go to a bar down the street. Every single day. Not sure about the other 2 directors, but I told all of this to the director of HR, who called me an hour after I left. The vice president and CIO finally got fired a couple months later, but by that time, another 20 people had left. This was a few years ago, and they've never really recovered the loss of all those experienced employees. It was tough for a couple months until I found a job, but I'd do it again. You have to draw the line somewhere. Next story. A woman brought in a cat to put down. 3 years old, healthy, and didn't match her furniture, but it was her cat, and no one else could have it. The vet agreed. He couldn't get a technician to help, so his girlfriend, the receptionist, did. They were left to run that business alone. All 5 technicians left, even the ones that weren't on shift for it. Next story. University did a study about how much IT staff was supposed to be paid versus what we are actually paid. They found we were all severely underpaid. When we requested raises as a result of that, they were denied. Not everyone quit that day, but that's the day everyone decided to look for jobs, and a few months later, 80% of the staff was gone. Next story. Not quite all in a day, but my last job got a new manager who had no idea how our department actually worked. Between micromanaging, we had to keep detailed time logs of how we spent our workday, down to the minutes we were away from our desk, and completely impossible productivity goals, and the fact that she bragged about coming back to work 2 days after gallbladder surgery as a way to shame us for taking time off, our department went from 8 people to 3 in a matter of months. I walked out after she accused me of faking a broken leg. The leg had healed by then, but she was still harping about me missing work on New Year's Eve because I couldn't drive and the bus didn't run on holidays. 3 others retired earlier than they'd planned. Next story. I walked into a retail store and asked for the manager. The girl at the counter said, "I'm the manager," so I gave her my resume and said I was looking for a job. A week later, I returned and again asked for the manager. A different girl was there and asked me why I wanted the manager. I told her about what happened the previous week. She looked around the counter and saw my resume. "Oh, is this you? Well, here's the thing. I'm actually the district manager. Everyone, including that manager, just quit, so congratulations! You're hired." Yes, the store was a disaster. Yes, I eventually quit, and when I did, all the employees who were hired after me also quit. And then the store closed permanently. Next story. Boss demanded that all the female car hops wear mini shorts as their uniform, and sent home any who complained or wore anything else. Most of the car hops were teenagers. Yeah, boss was a creep. Most of the crew quit that day. This was at a Sonic drive-in over 20 years ago. Next story. CEO zeroed out the entire company's PTO balance to reduce his cash liability while trying to secretly sell the company. I was told he was told by the legal team that if one more employee left, his sale would be jeopardized. This man was the worst human I've ever worked for. I went to the CFO, got all my employees' PTO back within 2 hours. Once it was on the books, myself and the entire engineering team walked out. A week later, the entire software team walked out. We left him in complete chaos with an $80 million liability. He still somehow found his golden parachute. I will never work for anyone but myself now. Next story. A girl got caught stealing from people's lockers and desk drawers. Initially, we were told she wasn't coming back, but a week later, we were prepared for her returning by a manager. 4 people just up and walked right then. Another 2 didn't come back after lunch. Hope she was worth it to them. I left shortly after that for a better job. Next story. Oh man, when I was an apprentice tech at a dealership years ago, we had a terrible management team. The upper management and service managers were brutal. We had a total of 3 service advisors at the time who were all good at their jobs and took a lot of undeserved abuse. They all found other work and organized to just not show up one day. It was absolute chaos watching the techs and customers give management a hard time while they scrambled to fill in. Thank you for bringing back that memory. Forget you, Mississauga Volkswagen. Next story. Had to sign in, clock in with the front desk, then with HR, then with the manager. HR stopped me and wanted to talk about first day on the job things and have an introductory chat. By the time I got to the manager, he said I was late and will be written up. I said I was on time and was talking with HR. He said that's no excuse. I didn't show up the next day. Next story. Working in a call center, government contract supporting a program that has 2 major busy seasons for different things and an off season. Teams meeting with us, frontline people who man the phones and take the calls, our supervisor, who was an angel, our manager, and the call center manager, top person on site. We just completed the 2nd major busy season, back-to-back calls from the beginning to the end of the day, automated with a routing system that puts the caller in our ear 3 seconds after the last one ends. There's no sitting there watching a phone ring. There's no avoiding the next call. It was grueling and torturous. The thing that made the job worth it was that for 1/3 of the year, there was time between calls, anywhere from a few minutes to nearly an hour. Except, that hadn't happened, and we all wondered why we were still getting B2B calls. We're going over call metrics, and the call center manager casually lets slip that they've finally managed to fine-tune the temp numbers at other sites to address the unwanted downtime issues to ensure we're consistently on the phone at all times year-round. You could hear a pin drop. Half the team quit within a week, and those that remained were informed that they were not allowed to tell anybody what the call center manager had said. Next story. I worked for Vail Resorts. They had just bought our resort. I was constantly butting heads with corporate, and my bosses trying to protect my workers and keep them happy and away from the abuse that place insisted on. 30% of the workforce of that place walked out with me the day they called me in and fired me midday. Store closed down for 1.5 days as they tried to get different workers from other places. That action was one of the biggest compliments I've ever had. Next story. The opposite of a bad manager driving people off. Corporate decided to fire a good manager because he made a higher-up look bad by accidentally exposing the higher-up using our branch budget to pay for legal stuff for branches they were planning on divesting later that year. They fired him and lost a good bunch of people he'd brought up and worked with over 20 years. He was skilled, knowledgeable, and well-liked. Bad leadership really ruins everything. Next story. Company I used to work for had a huge warehouse on an industrial estate. A nationally known retail company opened a new warehouse next door and basically poached all the staff overnight by offering a few pounds an hour more. In the space of a few days, almost the entire staff moved to the other site. Next story. Not seen, but lived the consequences. At some point, the director at my uni passed a law lowering the budget. Many teachers and other people warned that they would leave if it did pass. It passed. About 100 left. Next story. I was one of 4 managers reporting to a VP earlier in my career. She called us into a meeting and let us know corporate wanted territories redrawn and that she wasn't told which one of us, but she was going to have to go down a head count. She also mentioned we had some other positions opening up in a different part of the company at similar to higher pay grades, and if one of the 4 managers wanted to apply, she'd champion them. I applied to one of these internal positions, got it, and have been in that part of our business for a decade now. Best move I ever made. The other 3 managers all panicked, applied elsewhere, and on the day I started my new role, 2 of the 3 came in and resigned. The 3rd did so the next day. I always felt bad for the VP, as she was doing the right thing by her team and communicating, and it burned her. Next story. Worked at bar, grill that backed up to a small airport's runway. Very popular with locals and barflies. Sit at a fire pit and watch the private planes. On weekends, you could even book a biplane ride. The manager, owner, hired his BIL who was stupid, mean, and we all doubted the restaurant experience he claimed. Every shift with him was a cluster, and he liked to scream and threaten. Came into work and the entire bar staff had dipped. 2 bartenders, a barback, and all 3 cocktail waitresses. He told the waitstaff to just pick up tables outside and in the bar area too. No station assignments or anything. Couldn't even be bothered to try to see what was happening out there. In between a full dining section, you'd go out and find some angry seat yourselves outside. I asked if he could just make some smaller sections and assign them, but he got pissy and said all I ever did was complain. I worked the rest of my shift and quit too. The next day, the owner called to let me know I was late for work. BIL never told him I quit. He tried to make excuses and beg. I just told him no and hung up. Next story. My ex-GF was a part of something like this. Years ago, a higher-up was caught on a racist tirade on social media, and they held a meeting about it the next day with them present. Now about 65% of the workforce were Black, Indian, and Asian, all engineers. The higher-up tried to find out who leaked the conversation, blaming the workforce for trying to cancel him. The other higher-ups attempted to de-escalate the situation, but didn't reprimand the higher-up for their online rant. About 15 people handed in their badges to the manager and quit shortly after that meeting. Next story. During the last Verizon strike, lots of employees were not prepared financially to go without an income until union benefits kicked in. It was reported to my dad's supervisor that their garage and 3 other nearby garages had over 300 employees just flat out quit and look for work elsewhere. Next story. Manager was all clearly impaired, messed up a handful of orders up, had to make an example of someone, and fired my friend. We both worked at BK for beer money in early 20s after our blue-collar jobs. Me and like 3 other people all quit that night and never came back. Got a call from the DM offering a raise to stay. $1. Nah, I'm good. Went back to working on people's cars on the side. Next story. Not in one day, but watch 6 seasoned staff quit in 1 month. Management shrugged their shoulders with a guess they couldn't hack it attitude. People don't quit bad jobs, they quit bad bosses. Next story. First job out of high school and didn't know how much nonsense to take. It was at a bowling alley, and I literally had to do everything. My buddy Mike and I were already having issues with our manager who would come in late, eat the same ham and cheese sandwich for lunch, and read his Bible all day. Except for when he came out to bitch, we weren't doing enough. Finally, one day, after us getting there early to prep for leagues and try to be ready for a birthday party after, we were moving non-stop. And keep in mind this is going back in and out of 100-degree with high humidity Florida. I mean, I remember one night taking trash out at 2 a.m. and the gas station sign across the street said 103 degrees. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Anyway, that day we quit. We were just busting our behind. He saw it, but when I stopped to talk to the person hosting the party about what he needs, my manager thought I was socializing. I was like, are you serious? Not to mention, I was also on a stepladder handing up decor. He chewed me out, that I basically snapped back at him. He was all like, we can either have a problem or you can leave. I was like, later, jabroni. Have fun running this place yourself. Later that night, my buddy Mike was like, I quit too. No way I could do that. Plus, most likely your work. Next story. Not all in one day, but I've seen an entire staff quit throughout the week after the manager lost control during a meeting about spreading rumors. She was sleeping with the head of maintenance, and everyone knew. It was an absolute disaster, and staffing never recovered. Next story. Day 3 as a frack hand. Pulled up into what can only be described as a riverbed after 3 days of rain. The mud was literally hip deep. It was almost 100 degrees and like 90% humidity. We had to rig up, do the first blast, wire line, do another one, and tear down. I was brand new and several hundred miles from home. Zero experience, and at the time, still too tough to understand how bad the situation was. 20% of the crew quit when we got back to the office. Was told, that's normal. Boss bought a Subway as a thanks. That was the single hardest day of work I've ever done, in any field. It really set the bar high for what kind of tough situations I can deal with. Next story. They thought they could do the job but couldn't. Gathering petition signatures in public. It's simple and pays well. $25 to $30 per hour. But it's not easy. The average tenure for a canvasser during a petition campaign is 3 days. Next story. The new manager effect. Usually it's the older workers who, already tiring of the company's BS, only stayed because of some favorable arrangement with the previous manager, which of course gets instantly wiped out by the new guy, and that's all the incentive they need to get out of there. My personal record is seeing 4 waitresses quit in 1 day. I don't know how they knew, but they must have sensed the new incoming manager was a nightmare to work with, which I unfortunately learnt the hard way. Next story. Ambulance company I was working for stopped paying their employees after doing lots of shady mess to try and get around paying overtime. Meanwhile, the owner had multiple million-dollar homes and a new high-end pickup almost every month. Next story. A new company bought the place I was working, and the first thing they did was fire the manager and replace her with the CEO of the new company, who knew absolutely nothing about anything at all, and she hired a bunch of her family members to come work there, planning to fire most of us, but more than half quit so she didn't have to do that. Since then, the place went really downhill. Next story. Management tried to hide how many of us were exposed to COVID, and that we were even exposed at all. We worked in a restaurant, and essentially 3 servers had already went home that day with symptoms, while another 2 went home with symptoms when I got there for the night shift. We started asking questions, and management lied about what was happening. One of the servers still there ended up calling the other servers who were out. All 5 expressed showing symptoms for COVID. When we asked management why they didn't tell us, they said that there was no COVID and that we should just keep working. The issue we had was that one of our workers was in chemo. She was immunocompromised and directly exposed to these workers because she was not warned before she came in. Another server's son was also immunocompromised. Another server's child was waiting to get a surgery and was now also exposed due to management trying to cover it up and not shutting the restaurant down. When it became undeniable that COVID was now spreading among staff, management just tried to downplay it. When we asked why they didn't let us know, they said they didn't want us to panic. In other words, they didn't want to follow the law at the time and shut the restaurant down. Workers that had been with this restaurant for 5 to 15 years all put their 2 weeks in right then. This had a cascading effect where more than half of us quit within the next 2 weeks. Next story. In 2016 to 17, I worked at a meat processing plant as an overnight jumpsuit launderer and floor cleaner. The overnight meatpacking crew had 2 managers. One had been with the family-owned company for over 25 years, while the other had worked there just a few years. Senior manager was great, kept things flowing smoothly. Junior manager? Not so much. Well, junior manager makes a pretty big mistake regarding some food safety, lab testing protocol they had in place. I'm not sure of the full details. I only know what some friends of mine told me who worked in that department. It was caught, thankfully, before morning shift arrived, but the whole packing process came to a halt while they figured out next steps, which put things extremely far behind, and also caused me to have to work a 13-hour shift because I couldn't leave until all of the cleaning was finished, and I couldn't clean the area while they were dealing with things. Anyway, senior manager had been out that week, taking PTO for a minor eye surgery he had to have. When he returned, he was let go. Junior manager had already been fired at this point. Because of the seriousness of this mistake, even though he wasn't there, something about it being his responsibility to make sure that everyone under him knows and follows the proper procedures. Well, the night packing crew 100% rallies behind this manager, and when they came in and heard the news, they all walk off the floor, clock out, and leave. They didn't have a single person that stayed. This was a crew of 30+ people. The next day, magically, senior manager has his job back. I walked out mid-shift a couple weeks later for an unrelated reason. It was a horrible company to work for, and I only made $10.50 an hour. The only real perk was that I got to take home free hams that had been sliced open to be lab tested. Next story. Went to a bridal shop and we were told by a worker that we were welcome to stay and have the owner help us, but that the rest of them were leaving, quitting right now due to how horrible she treats her employees. Next story. Not me, but my roommate's partner was the manager of a department at a huge engineering firm. I can't remember the circumstances, but the employer made a radical policy shift in something that effectively super diminished her department and basically made it obvious that they were going to phase out that entire service. It wasn't her fault, but upper management had effectively siloed them, so there was no chance of moving to a different department, and they all went from valued contributor to who cares? They're drones? We don't need them anyway, with one quick policy change. The entire team, regionally, resigned en masse, all at a specific time one day, effective immediately. The sucky thing was they never warned my roommate's ex, and she really advocated for them and acted as their champion, fighting tooth and nail on their behalf. They kept her on salary for another year before giving her a very generous severance package. They couldn't keep her as a manager of no one, but they also couldn't rebuild a department that they were clearly going to phase out over the next 5 to 10 years. Next story. I worked for an absolute nut job. It was a PI firm. The guy who owned it was the most rotten human being you've ever met. You couldn't even make small talk. Even asking what plans he had for 4th of July weekend would be met with, "I'll be here, absolutely working," because no one can do their job. He would walk around strapped in the office. Staff meetings were just about berating each person and their work. One guy walked out, peeled away in his car. It was one of those jobs where people would get hired, go to lunch, and never return. I walked out myself after getting screamed at for faxing something before I should have. I was young then. It was like 20+ years ago. Never met a more insufferable person. Anyway, he's dead now. Sepsis. Fitting. Next story. New manager gave everyone the option of working for the next 6 months for 1/3 of our current pay and training our replacements, or quitting and taking a small severance. Almost everyone took the severance. The ones who stayed on were pulling their hair out within a few weeks because the new hires didn't understand English well enough to communicate and couldn't code at all. They would drag and drop things from YouTube tutorials or GitHub directly into the client's project, line for line, with zero regard as to how, if it would, could even work. Anytime they would go over concepts with the new hires or help them learn, the new hires would smile, nod, and go, "Oh, so that's how it works, huh?" And then be right back onto YouTube and GitHub looking for lines to copy and paste. Somehow the company is still being given huge amounts of funding and contracts by the government, despite hemorrhaging cash and reputation. Next story. It was over the course of 10 days, but after a bitter 4-month lockout, the union voted for the new contract. However, our office had the lowest scab rate, so they closed it down and sent all of us to work at Scab Central Office. In that meeting, someone put up her hand and asked if she could be laid off, thereby get a package. Quitting, firing, doesn't get you severance here. They said no. Someone else raised their hand and asked if she could get early retirement since she was so close. They said no. They quit that day. Over the next few days, people were dropping like flies. I held on because I was trying to find another job. I was also one of the last people scheduled to work at the old office, so that gave me more time than the others. By the time I was transferred to Scab Central Office, I had signed a job offer that didn't start for a couple of weeks, so I thought I'd ride it out a bit and make some easy money. I wore my union t-shirt on the second day, and the female manager pulled me aside and said that I was engaging in harassment by wearing it, and told me to take off my shirt. Then I made a fabulous scene shouting about how someone told me to take off my clothes at work because I have a flair for the dramatic. She threatened to fire me. I threatened her with the union, but I couldn't keep my face straight because I already had a job waiting. So I said fine, I quit. And she said, then I need that in writing. So anyway, I wrote my resignation letter in front of what was left of my coworkers, who were in a training class. Half of them had already had job interviews lined up that week. And I wrote my resignation letter in red coloring pencil on the back of a training book handout. I was escorted out by security. I swung by the old office to say goodbye to the few who were left. They were laughing when I showed because they'd been told not to let me in. They did. A few more were missing because they'd found jobs, and a few others were like me, with jobs starting in a couple of weeks, so planned to quit once their transfer downtown went through. Next story. For reference, I worked in legal processing. We weren't the lawyers that knew the law, but we were the people that put all of their thoughts into proper writing, proofread it, and formatted it in a way that the court systems allowed. We got a new manager who was a combination of technically qualified, but practically unqualified. Background in legal, but she lacked experience in legal processing, who was open about not having worked in legal processing and made all these promises that she would learn all the jobs under her at least vaguely so she'd get experience. 1. Never happened. 2. Actively made excuses to not learn if we weren't busy. 3. Was a people pleaser, but only for the clients. 4. Not even the clients liked her. That was just her. Rules she put in place was constant mandatory overtime since we were functionally understaffed. She never fought for more people staff members, so everyone was burned out. Over the course of a month, she made 6 different people cry across all shifts, including the ones she didn't work. There were now mandatory shift lead meetings, so all shift leads were on the same page. This would normally be fine, except shift leads in this case included people with that title and the workflow coordinators, who did not have that pay or title. On top of that, said meeting was done at 11 a.m., which would normally be fine, but we had a graveyard shift that was also required to be at said meeting. Imagine going to work at 11 p.m. at night to be told something that could have been an email. The straw that broke the camel's back was an email looking for volunteers for mandatory overtime that was written as a threat, stating if we didn't volunteer, our jobs were at risk. No one's names were mentioned. It was clearly a mass email, and I even spoke to the only actual shift supervisor who confirmed it was an empty threat. This email was also sent to a coworker who I will call Jay. Jay had gone to the hospital that morning for an emergency and was on serious painkillers. Jay, who was on medical leave, had their job threatened. The next morning, Jay sat beside me to type up their resignation letter, threatened legal action, CC'd the manager's boss on it, and then duct-taped their medical file to the manager's office door. I supplied the duct tape. Over the next 2 days, 4 other people quit. Over the next month, a total of 10 people quit, myself included. 2 months later, the manager was fired, and my old shift lead was promoted in her place. Next story. My boss fought against a cost-saving initiative that would really hurt the community we are supposed to be helping. Like at ground level, where people are already choosing between gassing up their car to go to work or having food, families would lose about $80 per week. He was told it wouldn't go through, but we needed to appear to be on board. It went through. He quit. The board asked him not to announce it. He announced it. 19 other team leaders and managers quit. They all moved to a tribal-based initiative where they can do the work they were meant to be doing all along. I'm happy for all of them. Next story. I was one of 2 in a day. First, the dishwasher quit. After he asked for a raise from minimum wage, the chef told him he didn't even deserve minimum wage. The person in question was a nice, hard-working dude, a war veteran, and super easy to get along with. He knew immediately that was nonsense, quit, and left. Then I finished my shift and left and told them to have my check ready because I was done working for them too. I made a decent wage there, but I wasn't willing to work for anybody that could think or say something like that. A couple more quit over the next couple of days because if someone demonstrates that level of absolute disrespect for the people that work for them, that is not a situation you can ever overcome or improve. That business did not last much longer after that. Next story. I worked for a towing company. We got paid 30% commission. The pay was great, TBH, but the owners were such mess people. One day, we get a call from a collision shop we have a contract with that states a call cost $150 anywhere within 20 miles. This specific call was 120 miles away. It was 100 degrees outside, 5 p.m., and most of us were about to go home. The owner was like, "Yeah, we'll still do the $150 pay." There were 5 of us in that room yelling, "What the heck?" He tells Brandon to go do it. This man screams, "Forget, no!" They go back and forth, and the owner was like, "Okay, find another job then." Bobby gets mad the owner just fired an employee that'd been working for 8 years. They go back and forth about, "How on earth are you keeping the rate the same?" And owner was like, "Well, forget you too, go home." At the same time, Michael gets into an accident 30 minutes later, gets sent to do a drug test, and fails the drug test. Meanwhile, I was in CDL school when I heard everything that happened, and was like, yeah, forget being the only one left, so I go drop my uniform off and never came back. Oh, they also fired Mark for not wearing a seatbelt. A to Z Towing in Loves Park, Illinois. Forget the owners, forget the wife especially. Satan's spawn. Next story. My school district is in danger of being taken over by the state, Texas. To buy a couple more years, the superintendent and school board threw 2 of the lowest performing schools under the bus and gave us to a shady charter school. Shady charter school came in and gave us a whole nasty speech about their expectations, constant monitoring, and demerits for minor infractions. And curriculum, highly scripted and not grade appropriate. And practices. Yes, the infamous holding rooms a la Houston ISD are a thing. Ending with the line, "Teachers no longer get a free ride here. Now you have to work for your money." 3/4 of the staff immediately applied for transfers within the district and threw the intent letters given to us by the shady charter into the trash. A woman who stayed with the shady charter told me they are desperately trying to hire people, but with their attitude and borderline illegal practices, they are struggling. My heart hurts for my students, but I'm angry at my district and all the dumb fucks who vote for the mouth breathers. Next story. Logged in one Monday to an email in my inbox. It was from HR offering a very generous early retirement severance package. It turns out they offered it to every employee over the age of 50 and 15 years tenure. All of the key employees took it, all of us. The ones that get things done behind the scenes and know where all of the bodies are buried. Good luck to those left behind. Next story. My girlfriend moved in with me last week. It took 2 days. One of the movers walked off the job the first day, and another walked off the job the second day. Every single one of the movers was newish, and they were getting worked all day for only $14 an hour. The one on the first day literally just sat down on the steps, pulled his phone out, contacted an Uber, and peaced out without saying a word. Next story. Hired as exclusively remote. Owner suddenly demanded RTO when our contract said exclusively remote, and the language about the company being able to change that having been crossed out and initialed by most people and countersigned by the company. Like 95% of the workforce said, "Forget you, I'm not coming back." Owner was so annoyed he broke his tempered glass door from what I heard. Company no longer exists. Next story. My company started drug testing. Lost about 33% of their entry-level staff, mostly college kids, within the first month, many on the day of the announcement of the policy. Within a few years, they stopped drug testing. Next story. Our company was purchased by a rival company, and our salesmen were told they would be moving from a commission-based pay model to an hourly rate. We had, I think, 6 salesmen at the time, and they all left on the spot. Next story. Had a female boss that was desperate to promote a woman to a manager position, told me and the rest of the team that none of us were in the running because we were men. I think we would have been okay with it if it was someone whom was qualified. She instead promoted the only woman who was an alcoholic mess. She slept on the job and had already meddled in most people's personal lives. A team of 9 just upped and walked out. Next story. I worked in an ice cream shop, and the manager was awful. She once stopped me from handing an ice cream cone to an old man buying ice cream for his granddaughter to weigh the ice cream and scold me for over-scooping in front of the horrified customer and confused child. She liked to give us 3-hour shifts on weekend nights, so you wrecked the night but made less than $10. 5 of the 7 workers, all high school kids, quit in the same couple days. Next story. Sales office boss was 31 years old, worth $30 million, coming from nothing, and had a serious substance abuse problem, but was a demon on the phone when he was working. We had servers coming to the office every day and had to lock the office door because his baby mama was trying to serve him. Tipping point was when he was clearly out of his mind and trapped his babysitter in his house while tweaking out and holding his baby. My manager showed up to his house for some reason, physically intervened, took the baby, and called the baby mama to give him to her. He woke up, called the police because his baby was gone, and proceeded to get arrested. After the cops realized what was happening, my friends all quit that day, but I somehow missed the memo. Showed up to one last day of work to him clearly in a very disturbed state, rambling incoherently nonstop. I walked out that day too. Mess was crazy. Next story. I was a supervisor for a seasonal warehouse job. Most of the seasonal employees were students. Every year on the first day, there would be a few people who walked out because they realized how miserable the job was. Next story. I worked at a small supermarket as my first part-time job when I was 16. About 5 or 6 of girls who worked there asked for time off to go on holiday together, but were refused, so they just walked straight out. It must have been about a third of the staff, so it was an interesting few weeks afterwards. Next story. This isn't exactly that, but when I worked at a summer camp as a teenager, I was 15 on the kitchen crew that served meals and cleaned up after. That summer, a bunch of counselors got caught in an inappropriate situation. No joke, that's what happened. Camp director couldn't fire that many counselors, so he decided to take away Honor Camper from anyone who had it. Honor Camper was a big deal at camp. Basically, it wasn't something you earned. It was something that everyone around you voted that you displayed the characteristics of a great camper. Counselor. It was supposed to be for life, and people really valued it. So when he took away Honor Camper from them, the entire staff revolted. They marched into the camp director's office and turned in their honor cups, which was what said you were an honor camper. They didn't want to be a part of something he could take away on a whim. He threw a fit, but eventually caved and gave everyone their cups back and sort of backed off on punishing anyone for it. It was my first taste of what collective action can do when someone is being unreasonable. Next story. I worked for a company that did tele-fundraising. A few weeks after training, everyone in my group was having problems with the company's software, and as a bonus, our hours were cut from 40 a week to 16 if you were exceptionally lucky. One day, I got the fun of watching 16 people leave messages in the group chat that they were quitting because the company was a disaster. Next story. Working as a technician in a dealership service department. The third time in the year they raised the hourly shop rate without raising our wage, and then increased the cost of our medical insurance. That was end of the day on a Friday. Monday, and 4 of the 5 technicians load their tools and are gone before 10 a.m. Next story. Was swallowed into a larger American oil service company, went from absolute freedom to absolute dictatorship, and then set to train the people that was going to do the job I was looking forward to for months. I guess we were about 15 people in that workshop. Over about 3 months, half of us quit. All heck broke loose. This was organized. It was illegal. It was whatever they managed to blast at me in 30 seconds. But then I became rather annoyed, so I told them that I have absolutely no idea what the heck they were talking about. What the forget were they rambling about? Turns out I was the third one handing in my resignation that day, and we were only at lunchtime. We have 3 months resignation here, so it was a rather fun 3 months. We did our jobs as we were supposed to do, but the dynamics changed quite a lot. I had a new job lined up just a week into the 3 months, so I did not give much more than absolute minimum. Next story. Worked for DHL. Manager was lying to several people about them becoming the new manager. Gave the job to a friend of his. We were only a 7-person crew. 3 of us walked after we got that news, then saw a 600-pound CNC table was loaded on top of all of the other packages and destroyed them. We got hired on at FedEx. While we were out at breakfast together, the lazy guy we all didn't like accused us of stealing the scanners. We got a text threatening police from the road owner. I took pictures of us dropping off all company equipment in the trucks and giving keys to the supervisor though, So sent that, then never heard anything else. Next story. Friend of mine helped get me a job in IT with a small and local graphics art firm. It was a great place to work. Lots of cool people, maybe about 30 employees in total. Then the owner hired a buddy to be the sales manager. There was an experienced salesperson who deserved the job more, but it wasn't our choice. After about 3 months on the job, Buddy was leaving 2 hours early every day to go to a lounge down the street for drinks. Then, when he was told not to do that, he started having a couple of drinks in his office. He started messaging the women in the office, making crude jokes, my friend included. Then, he started hitting on them. Then the unwelcome touching. Then the extremely inappropriate after-work messages. About 20 of us went to the owner and the HR person, demanding he be fired for this behavior. HR person agreed with us that he was a liability. Owner decided to back his buddy because he was going through a hard time. We all walked out that day, including the HR person. 100% of the artists, IT people, and other support staff all left. There were only a handful of salespeople and a cleaner left. Reputation got out about the firm, art people talk. They had trouble hiring new artists and went bankrupt about a year later. Next story. A local cafe with a back bar was taken over with new owners. The bar was known for its heavy pours and had a cult following with the older, tame crowd. We have a couple local bars that are more trendy for the younger crowd. New owners wanted to change the cafe into a higher-end restaurant. As a result, the bar on the back end started pouring every mixed drink a lot lighter than what brought what little crowd they could muster. 3 bartenders quit day 2. I haven't bothered to even check the spot out. They even got rid of my $12.99 10-ounce steak special on Sunday, so I haven't been back. I used to hit that religiously for a couple years. What a heartbreak. Next story. A line cook was sent home sick, and a manager decided to jump in the kitchen to help and became a complete behind. The waitstaff got fed up and almost all walked out, and the kitchen staff followed. This was on a Friday. The next day, the staff that was scheduled that did not work the previous day came in and set up. When the doors opened, they all walked out. It was brilliant. Next story. The owner of an establishment, in a fit of rage, climbed up at her desk, threw the computer monitor at the ground, and standing up she screamed bloody heck for about 20 minutes. They are no longer my client. Next story. This is not overnight, but I need to vent. Small, 30-person company. Worked with kids with autism. Owner started the company because so many big companies out there were not doing good work and prioritized business over the quality of service. Low-paying job, but we really did care and value the right things. We're tight as a team, company, which made up for some of the lack of pay. Turnover was high, but a core group of people stayed for years. Then she got onto some Dave Ramsey nonsense and started making wild goals about expanding the team, trying to double in a year. She stopped giving raises to an already low-paying job and made other policies that put even more on our plates. What's more, she used the "we are a family, so we need everyone to sacrifice for the greater good of the company" nonsense to justify overworking and screwing over the loyal folks that had been there for years in favor of trying to bring in new people. Well, the turnover stayed high, and the OG loyal employees started leaving. I even talked to her about not paying us enough and not giving raises for all the extra work. Her response was, "We don't normally hear about pay as the reason people leave in their exit interviews." How completely daft can you be trying to pay people less to do a highly technical and stressful job than in-and-out employees? One of the final straws for me was finding out that her mother, who worked at a desk doing data entry and checking logs, made 50% more than us supervisors who were running around ragged. Best decision I ever made to leave. Next story. I was working at a grocery store over the summer as a department supervisor when I got a resignation text from one of my favorite employees, and then a second employee came to me to quit in person not even an hour later. My own manager was being a jerk that day anyways, and it being near the end of my shift, I quietly packed up my stuff, spent the remaining time drafting my own resignation letter, printed a copy to hang on my locker, and then hit send and walked out for my surprise last shift. Next story. I used to work at a very toxic public service provider. Morale was about as low as it could possibly get, to the point where management hired a group of part-time staff to alleviate the work burden on the existing staff. They had been operating about 10 people under what I'd consider minimum for a long time. They announced the hiring of 5 new staff. They introduced them, took them around. 3 quit within a week. 1 made it 2. The last one resigned at the urging of the union president, who told her to save her career and not work there. All 5 gone within a month, and they just didn't replace them. My favorite was probably the staff who noped out at lunch during the onboarding day. Just didn't come back. I'm out. So happy to no longer be there. Next story. I was one of the people who quit. I noticed that our products were lacking. I had customers come in with simple requests that would make them stay and actually recommend us to people in their trade. I passed all this info upwards, and the people said all of these things will be addressed. Absolutely nothing happened, and this was one of the better SaaS out there in this segment at the time. I was in sales. Some of us grew so tired with leadership's ineptitude that we all quit in the same week because we were bleeding sales and customers to our competitor. I got called in after I left for an offboarding, spilled my guts, didn't hold back on any criticism. 2 fellow sales reps that also quit called me and told me about them also being called to a similar meeting with the highest HR person. They said basically the same that I did. This was a big company that was basically made up of smaller, different companies. So exactly a month to the day after I quit, they fired almost everyone. They kept a few admins because this was mostly subscription-based services. Let the company run for a year with inflated profit because there were almost no employees eating margins. Then they sold the bones and client list to our competitor. I checked it out. 2 years after the sale, our competitor had added our turnover and tripled it by simply taking our customers and implementing all the functions and updates our customers were asking for to their software. I also know this since one of the guys that quit started working there and basically got to sell to his old customers. Only this time, he sold a much better version. So that is a story of how you fuck up a perfectly good company with bad leadership. Next story. During an all-hands meeting, when we were expecting to be informed about bonuses we had earned, instead of a bonus for doubling our monthly goals during a wage freeze, please enjoy a complimentary small drink from the soda fountain. We even kept it on for second shift for you guys. 14 people, 6 of them 40-plus year employees, threw their badges at the guy and left on the spot. At the beginning of the shift, total shift workforce was 60-ish, and 4 of those guys were directly involved in prototyping with the engineers and validating out-of-spec parts being reworked with new processes to potentially recover otherwise scrap parts and save a few million a year in rework. All of that got flushed because someone thought they could throw their weight around without considering people who have chock-full 401ks and only need a reason to leave. We got to, I think, 28% of the goal for the next month and did not break 100% until after I left a few years later. Next story. I wasn't there. I started the wave and the rest quit over the course of the next month, before the company started throwing out pay rises to stem the bleeding. One of my work friends told me what happened after I left. Basically, I got fed up with the bad pay, and in my country, the government let companies cut our pay by 20% during COVID. So the company cut my pay down below minimum wage, and I got annoyed off. Then they acted like they were super cool for even keeping us on at all. I have always saved and invested my money, so I have plenty. After that, I decided, forget this. I'm going to university to get a degree and a better job. I didn't make a secret that I was annoyed off and leaving. Fortunately, after COVID calmed down, the economy started booming, and there were shortages of labor in the country, so a lot of the other workers followed me and went to get better paid jobs. Next story. I did a stint as a receptionist at a staffing agency. Our main client was the local waste management company, who were constantly needing pickers, the guy who hangs off the back of the garbage truck and throws trash in, no driving. People always thought they could handle 12 hours of throwing heavy garbage in the summer heat, until they actually got out there. We had people quit mere hours in, multiple at a time, regularly. We would warn them that the job was intensely physical and difficult, and people would still come in, filled with bravado and confidence, and leave with their tails tucked. It was a tough role to fill. Next story. I watched an entire shift of nurses just walk out one night. I work front desk, so I'm not involved in the ongoings of the nursing side, but I was aware of their general gossip in the lobby, and when they thought I wasn't listening. The nurses absolutely, utterly, and completely loathed the head of nursing. She changed the standard nursing shifts to something that cut their hours down a lot, had them going between floors instead of assigning them to one spot. She was trying to mandate uniforms that were pretty impractical. She was ignoring flagrant bullying issues between nurses. The nurses were annoyed. They had been idly talking about going for a different job in a similar place. This was a group of maybe 5 to 8 nurses. I don't remember the exact amount off the top of my head, but they covered 2 floors easily enough. Something happened when they went up to start their evening shift, and as I was closing down the desk, they had a mass exodus into the employee parking lot. I just quickly got my behind out of there, since hell no, I was not getting involved. Next story. I work in a restaurant and have the worst FOH in the history of any restaurant job I've had in the past 13 years. We had 2 servers, mom and daughter, supposed to be training a new girl. While she was ringing something up, they went, got the drinks for another of her tables, but didn't bring them out to them. Just said, hey, here is what they ordered, go give it to them. One of the drinks was alcoholic. Not only was the girl underage, and I don't know if she is technically allowed to do that, but the other girls never ID'd the table. The person that ordered it was underage and sent there as a bust. She was an investigator's daughter. So this brand new girl gets in a huge amount of trouble. The restaurant is fined and somehow kept their alcohol license. And the 2 other girls quit once they realized how bad they messed up trying to get the new girl fired. The plan was to tell on the server that she brought out alcohol to someone she didn't ID and keep her out so they got more tables. Next story. Assault by a vice president on a manager, director. At a 200-person work event and dinner, she escaped and contacted a lawyer the next day. This is the right move. She called the CEO and the HR VP and left a message that she would be taking a PT day. Also the right move? She had no further contact with the company. All communication was via her lawyer. A week later, the VP was still working. A month later, the VP had 0 consequences, and the company had negotiated a substantial payout to the woman who was seriously assaulted. A group of senior execs, not the CEO, pushed to have the VP terminated. The board of directors made no recommendation. The HR vice president made no recommendation. And, I need to mention, the CEO and the vice president in question were best friends from college, now in their 40s. Publicly traded company. People had options and lots of stock. But 10 people quit within the month. 5 people quit on the same day. 3 were senior execs. 120 days after the essay, the DA issued an arrest warrant for the vice president. Huge impact. The company was in complete chaos. My girlfriend at the time worked there. I knew almost all the people. Next story. The salon took the credit card processing fee for each transaction out of the employee tips, rather than paying it themselves. Highly illegal. IRS got involved, and a bunch of people that decided to sue for lost wages all quit at the same time, before gathering for a class action lawsuit. Next story. We aren't sure. We're waiting to find out. My teacher friend was fired under circumstances we don't understand. We're an at-will state, so. Then a week later, her boss's boss, and the head of schools resigned. Next story. Back in the early 2000s, something like 03/04, I worked a summer temp job at a plant that made small parts for a major auto manufacturer. The week before their summer shutdown, it was announced that their summer profit-sharing bonus was being canceled due to lower than expected sales across the board. People were understandably annoyed, but willing to deal with it. The next day, our local paper had an article about how the company had promoted a new CEO whose salary was around $6 million per year, more than twice the last CEO. Nearly half the oncoming shift clocked in, quit, and went home. Next story. New head caddy at a high-end golf club called us all in for a meeting, decided some changes were going to be made, said whomever didn't like it would be replaced by the end of the week. We all quit right there on the spot, 60+ caddies. By the end of the week, he was calling everyone, begging us to come back. No apologies, just wanted us to have a heart and help him out. As a huge members tournament was planned and he couldn't find enough caddies, and if he couldn't figure something out, the tournament would be canceled. Word got around pretty quickly, but instead of telling him off, we told him we would be there. None of us showed up, and he was fired in front of 100+ extremely annoyed off members. Next story. DRP, government buyout, Elon's email, whatever you want to call it. My agency lost about 10 to 15% of its workforce on September 30th, 2025. I'd say it was a 70-30 split between retirement and resignations. I was one of those resignations. I'd worked for my agency almost 12 years, but a lot had changed from when I started. At 33, with 2 small kids and a husband on nights, I could do 5 days a week in the office with a 1-hour each-way commute. I ended up completely pivoting careers and now work a remote position for a law firm in billing. From what I gather, what's left of my team is completely demoralized and everyone is looking to leave. I predict by the end of this administration, my original team of 9 will have maybe 1 to 2 of those same people. Next story. Chef here. We lost power in the busy, huge restaurant. It wasn't going to come back on that night. We needed to close because that goes against safety and health codes. The owner refused to close, obviously. The main issue is that he refused to turn off the hot food service, like the pizza oven, the huge 18-burner gas range, and the wood-fired grill. The entire bow started being affected by all the smoke and carbon monoxide fumes building up in the kitchen because the exhaust hoods were dead. People started passing out and needed to be pulled outside for fresh air. The owner screamed at us to take turns rotating back and forth from the kitchen to outside to keep people from passing out, but get back inside and cook or be fired. I, as the chef, seeing the lawsuit coming, ended up threatening to quit if he didn't start thinking straight. Ultimately, our favorite mama cook passed out. We pulled her out and called 911. I had 911 send fire, EMS, and police. Every Bow employee quit at once. I ended up recording my immediate resignation on my phone camera and ended up including all the cooks. We all quit in solidarity and ended up talking to the local news who followed the fire truck. Next story. My first job was in a banquet hall as a server. My manager verbally berated one of my coworkers into coming into work despite him being ill. The coworker had to spend approximately 15 minutes in the restroom due to his stomach issues, for which he was fired. The manager literally waited on the other side of the bathroom door to fire and verbally assault this kid a second time. It was right in front of 5-ish employees, 4 of which quit that night. The manager had been a major jerk up until this point, but had not lashed out that aggressively before. Trevor, I hope you aren't reading this, because it means you're still alive. Forget you. Next story. Every time I've ever seen a mass exodus from a job, it's almost always 1. A manager that held it down is quitting. 2. The commission rate was altered to screw everyone. Or 3. Someone from the outside is promoted above the deserving people. Next story. Assistant director loved to yell at people about everything, and it was usually over something very small and very fixable. Me and the other manager quit on the same day about 3 months into the job. Next story. I worked as a nurse on a psychiatric unit. For months, we asked for more staffing for safety risks. That day, a patient took their own life on our unit because we did not have enough staff to monitor him. 3 of us walked off and never returned.